Hello once again, my readers of awesome literature. My name is, as always, Nick Pell, and this is once again coming from my white room. Now, this week's book that I have for you guys is Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. This is a book that I've heard a lot about. I believe that the author passed just in the last year, and this book was talked about quite a bit. I owned it beforehand, but I decided to read it, partly because of that. And it's actually pretty good, but it does have some flaws, which I'll get to. As usual, let's start with the characters. And the first character is the story's main character, which is Guy Montag. And he is essentially a fireman. In the society, firemen start the fires, they don't put out the fires. And the main thing that they start fires to is books. And because in the society, books are outlawed. And so, or at least reading is outlawed. And so that is his main job, but he is our main protagonist of the story. Our other main character is Clarice McKellen. I think I'm saying that right. And she is this little girl who Montag meets very early on in the story. And she's the one who kind of sets the spark in his mind, which kind of makes him rethink everything that he's known about the society in which he's living. And while she doesn't show up as much in the book as I might like her to, she is a very important character and very influential to the way that Montag kind of develops his thinking over the course of the book. Next up is Betty, and Betty is the fireman chief of the city in which the story is set, and he seems to be knowledgeable about a lot of the books just about a lot of the books, because there's a part where he seems to be quoting a bunch of things, and he seems to be well versed in literature, and yet he is one of the main firemen who goes out and burns all these books. So I would have liked to see a little bit more of him in terms of like backstory or seeing his character, but yeah, that's Betty in a nutshell. And then we also have Mildred, who is Montag's wife. She is basically completely brainwashed by the society. She's so involved in her technology. She just wants more and more of it so that she can connect with her family on computer screens, and that's all she really does. She just sleeps, eats, and just sits in front of a computer screen, which are like implanted on the walls, and she just like sits there and talks with her family whole day. And it's not really even clear, because the word family is always in quotes, so I'm not even sure if it is her family or just people who she believes to be her family, because she can't even remember half the stuff, and she doesn't really care about a lot of things. So yeah, that's a very interesting character. And lastly, we have Faber, which I think I'm saying his name right. And he shows up in the later part of the book, but he is basically the ally, the one ally that Montag ends up having in this whole story. And he is a one-time English professor, I believe, and he's basically kind of on the down low. He's still a believer in books and literature and everything, and so it's a very interesting situation. He's a very cool character to see. But those are the main characters. There are a few more, but not a lot in the book. So yeah, moving on to the plot. And I've kind of talked about the plot already, but the plot is essentially, it doesn't really say here, but at some point in what I'm assuming to be the US, books become outlawed, and they're seen as fiction, and therefore, because of that, they're not pragmatic, and they're not useful. So they just kind of become seen as useless, and they're just gotten rid of because of their ideas and how they kind of cause people to think things that, in terms of what the government thinks they should think, are not right. They set out these firemen, which is what Montag and Betty are, to find people who are hoarding books and to burn the books, and if necessary, burn the people too. So, and the house that the books are stored in. And yeah, Montag, he meets Clarice, and he has his mind kind of boggled. He starts to think about things that he hasn't ever really thought about, and that causes him to question a lot of the things that he does in terms of burning books and the morality behind that, and starts to wonder if books have something else to offer besides just what he's been taught to believe. that is essentially the plot in a nutshell. I'm not going to spoil anything, honestly, but yeah, it's fairly good. There are some issues which I will get to in enjoyment. There are three themes that I found in this story, and the first one is right versus wrong. This is mainly dealing with Montague and his idea of what is right and what is justified in terms of action in this situation, and also what society views as wrong, and seeing how those two things differ and whatnot. Also, loss of humanity, and that's mainly dealing with Mildred, his wife. It's kind of reflective upon The Machine Stops, which is a book that, well, a short story that came out quite a few years ago that I read, that I might review at some point. But yeah, lost humanity, one of the main aspects of Mildred's character. And lastly, we have value of a book. Obviously, I do book reviews, so I understand the value of them. They have knowledge and insight, and so basically a view into another type of life. I heard a quote one time that goes something along the lines of, "Why live one life if you can live 1,000?" And that being seeing a life through a book. That's a very important thing, and that kind of more or less comes into this story, because books are burned, and then Montague begins to question this, and he starts to see the value of books, and starts to kind of fight for them. Yeah, those are the themes, and so if you found any others, leave them below. I'd be interested in seeing those. And we move on to enjoyment. And for the most part, I did enjoy this book. It was very good. It was a lot better than I was kind of expecting it to be. But I did have a few qualms with it. One thing is that I felt like it kind of just ended kind of briefly. I felt like in the middle of part 3, because the book is split into 3 parts. It's about 165 pages. In about the middle of the 3rd part, I felt like it could have been in the middle of the story, because something happens and he ends up in a place where it seemed like it could have kind of continued for quite some time and built into more of an elaborate story of kind of revolution and revenge and stuff. It just kind of ends, some significant thing happens, and then stuff happens. I don't want to spoil it, but I felt like the story could have continued along quite a lot. Yeah, that was one qualm that I have. But I did like the characters. They're all kind of spread out for the most part. I did feel like Claire's could have been more involved in the story before she was cut out of it. I always like to see backstory and see why people are doing what they do, so I felt like it could have given a little more insight into like the world around them and the society and how it came to be. So it kind of had the 1984 feel that I didn't really like. It had kind of the same type of feel as that in terms of the society. That's kind of just like how it is, and nobody really questions it. You don't really know where in the world this is. I'm assuming it's the U.S. Just little things, just that kind of bugged me about it. But yeah, plot was pretty interesting, because the idea of burning books, not a good thing to me, and I think it happened at one point in history too. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy the book, and I highly recommend it if you enjoy Bradbury's novels or stories, or if you like classic books, because this is a classic and it is short and it is pretty easy to get through if you can spend a few hours on it. That's my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Like, favorite, comment, and subscribe if you so choose. I would appreciate it immensely. And yeah, that's it. As always, my name is Nick Pell, and once again, my good people, keep on reading.